I'm retired NYPD Homicide Sergeant Bill Cannon. I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes with you talking about how to spot deception, the different signs, the different body languages, the different behaviors, the cadence, what they say, how they say it. These are all signs of deception. With Ted Bundy, he had very specific ways to lie and to manipulate. He used his whole personality to ensnare his victims. So in the same way that he used that to ensnare his victims, we on the other side of the fence are going to use our skills to ensnare a serial killer by recognizing body language and how to read deception. Behind every headline, there's a moment where the truth tries to hide. Detectives don't just listen, they watch. Today we break down how body language reveals deception using some of the most infamous crime cases in history. And over decades of investigation, I've learned the body tells a story long before the words come out. Many times in my career, someone would be trying to lie, but the detective would catch them in the lie. And that's one of the most important things about interview and investigation, interrogation also, is to know when to listen and when to come in with that killer blow that you're going to get, an admission or a confession. Body language is often called a universal dialect, but it's not perfect. Nervousness, culture, or even personality quirks can mimic deception. That's why the first step is always a baseline behavior, studying how someone acts when relaxed and honest before asking tough questions. One of the things you must also realize in baseline, it's always good, not just good, imperative, that the investigator not just jump right into the interview, but find out many things about the suspect before the detective goes into what we call the box or the interrogation room. What is the perpetrator's criminal history? What's the perpetrator's marital status or job status? Find out all of those things because you're trying to establish a baseline. Find out who this person is. So if you ask this person questions that you know to be true and they lie, that tells you something right away. Common body language signs of lying: avoiding or overcompensating eye contact. Some liars avoid eye contact while others overcompensate and stare intensely. They use it as a weapon. During his interviews, Chris Watts often maintained unsettling eye contact, trying hard to seem convincing while lying about the disappearance of his wife and his daughters. One of the most successful type of liars are the liars that actually believe their lies, because by believing their own lies, they don't have the same reaction in breathing, in their heartbeat, because they're believing their own deception. Touching the face or the mouth, covering the mouth, rubbing the nose, touching the lips, subconscious attempts to hide the truth. Casey Anthony frequently touched her mouth and face during early police questioning about Kaylee's disappearance. Classic indicators of internal conflict. I just would like to mention that sometimes an individual has unique body or mannerisms that are unique to themselves. Not all of these body language signals are universal. So the good and the astute investigator must watch, must see things that are indicative of deception, but are personal for the person that they're interviewing. Fidgeting and restlessness, restless hands, bouncing knees, tapping fingers, they are signs of stress. During police interrogations, Brian Laundrie was notably restless in body cam footage before fleeing and hiding. That is a common denominator with many people who are being deceptive. Contradictory gestures. When words and body language clash, like nodding yes while saying no. A real case example, Jodi Arias often nodded while denying involvement in Travis Alexander's murder. A mismatch that caught investigators' attention. When you look at the entire person and what they're saying and how they're saying, it's not just the body language, but the way, the inflection of the voice, the tone. If someone is telling truth, but they're ashamed of the truth, they may lower their voice because they're ashamed of what they're saying. So you may have to get them to speak up louder, especially in those parts where the perpetrator is making an admission or starting to make a confession. How about a stiff or a defensive posture? Crossed arms, clenched fists, or suddenly going stiff. Signals of defensiveness. In the interviews with Stefan Stearns, who was accused of murdering little Madeline Soto, Stefan Stearns, practically through the entire interview, had his arms folded across his chest, clenched across his chest. And he would frequently, his voice would alter almost into a whiny, I don't know, I'm not sure what happened. He would have a whiny voice when he was talking. It was unnatural. It was really hard to listen to. So those are some of the things that the investigator must look at. Excessive sweating and blushing is another thing. Sweating on the forehead, upper lip, or even sudden blushing can reveal deep stress. In a real case example, Amanda Knox during Italian police questioning showed extreme stress signs, including visible sweating and rapid breathing. So these outward signs can lead to a suspect making an inadvertent admission or confession. So when an investigator observes these types of body language, rather than sitting back, they should bear down and go in and start asking difficult questions of the perpetrator. Rapid blinking or dry mouth. Blinking faster than normal. Lip licking and hard swallowing, often due to adrenaline and nerves. In a real case example in courtroom footage, Gypsy Rose Blanchard displayed rapid blinking during questions about her mother's murder. So these are unintentional physical outward signs that the body is demonstrating when there is stress. There's another thing you can actually observe, but you have to be very, very keen observer. When someone is lying, the pupils of their eyes get smaller. You ever hear that expression? He has beady eyes. That's because he or she is lying. Another body language sign, subtle self-soothing gestures, like pulling the ears are easy to miss, but telling. In a real case example, Ted Bundy, during early police encounters, often touched his ears and adjusted his hair when confronted with direct questions. This is not uncommon because someone is under deep stress when they are being questioned. Someone, potentially, depending on what they say, could be facing life in prison. Another sign, body language, facial and verbal cues. Facial tension, flared nostrils, biting lips, all signs of anxiety. But listen carefully too. When people lie, their voice often betrays them. And I mentioned Stefan Stearns, how his voice would get whiny. Pronoun avoidance. Chris Watts referred to his daughters as those girls instead of their names. Overcompensating honesty. Well, to tell you the truth, no, I wouldn't lie. That is overcompensating. Lori Vallow used phrases like, I'm telling the truth, repeatedly during her missing children investigation, often a warning sign. Some pro tips that you can get from detectives. Some inside tricks. Truth tellers gesture before speaking. Liars often gesture after they talk. Micro expressions. The first facial expression is usually honest. Sudden head movements. Quick tilts or jerks can signify discomfort. Cluster behavior. Always look for multiple signs at once, not just one. One behavior isn't enough. You need to spot 2, 3, or more signs together and always account for nerves. Even innocent people get scared. That's why when you're speaking to someone in an interview or interrogation situation, you should spend the first 10 or 15 minutes putting them at ease. Talking about almost nothing. You schmooze them for the first 10 to 15 minutes. Help them to feel like a human being. Make them comfortable. Ask them if they'd like a glass of water. That is the key for soliciting information for the good investigator. So what is the conclusion to reading a person like a book, body language? Detecting deception is a blend of science, art, and patience. These techniques sharpen your instincts. And in some cases, instincts save lives. Always trust what you see, not just what you hear. And one other good point, if you're interviewing or interrogating someone who's a difficult interview, don't be afraid to take a break. Tell the suspect, I need to use the bathroom. I need to get a glass of water. And then when you leave the room, either you or have someone else observe what they're doing in the box as you look through the one-way glass. Are you seeing signs of nervousness? Are they putting their head in their hand? Are they putting their head down on the desk? Are there clear signs of stress? If there are, that's a time to get right back into the box and go for it. Go for that confession, right? Sometimes we take too long to come to the point, and other times we go in too quickly. So part of observing all the things that you need to be a good investigator is to know when, as Kenny Rogers said, you got to know when to hold up and you got to know when to fold up. And if you can master all of these traits and all of these techniques, then you're going to be a good interviewer. So those are the skills that a great interrogator gets from reading body language, reading voice, reading the situation, determining whether or not the suspect is telling the truth or is lying. These are the skills that an investigator acquires over a long career. And these are the skills that will get you, as an investigator, confessions and admissions in your future work. I hope you enjoyed today's lesson. I'm Bill Cannon from Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Thanks for listening.